so this is going to be the last lesson. For the most part, I'm just going to add in a lot of details. I've got a really nice base. I've got my layers nicely organized. And I'm ready to put in some of those last details. So I'm just going to dive in. You're going to have to flop around a lot with showing a few pieces. So I'm going to change my head back. I'm also going to look how different the coloring is. I'm going to also change my neck to a stroke. I'm going to change my ear to a stroke. And that's it. That gives me kind of enough where I can work with. And then I'm going to lock these all again. Okay, so those are kind of my outlines. I'm going to change that to facial outlines. I'm going to call this final details. You can get as detailed as you want. This is going to be a medium amount of detail. So we're going to work with some gradients. We're going to work with some different transparencies, and it will give some more form to the entire face and give you an idea of what you could do if you wanted to keep going and make it really spectacular. Okay, so first is the teeth. That's kind of weird. I know, let's find my teeth. I know that my teeth, you can't see them over here, but they're not, I don't really want that to be just blackness. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go into this layer because I need to be able to get on top of this, but under these. So you'll notice if I make a new layer, it just pops into its own. So I'm going to drag that down. I'm going to call this mouth details. I'll go back up to final details later. And everything else is locked. Great, except for this one. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a shape that ties into sort of this outside little triangle. I'm going to make another one, so it's already done. I'm going to make sure these are kind of straight so that my teeth don't look like a weird shape. So this is going to eventually turn into a nice shadow that helps give volume. Okay, so I have that piece, and again, it's on top of my teeth, and it's below my lips. I could call this top lip, and I could call this bottom lip, just so I know what I'm looking at. You can always extend so you can read better if that gets annoying. So I want to take this layer and I want to add a gradient to it. Make sure your fill is forward or you won't be able to. Notice if I have it like this, it gives me like a little You've got to have your fill forward. All right, so I'm adding a fill. It looks like nothing was added. That's just a weirdness of what's happening right now, but there is indeed. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to change the colors of my two markers. I want black and black. And what I want is this first one that's on this left side. Oh, I also want it to be a linear and not a radial. Okay, there. So this first one is only at a 50% opacity. I want that to be a little darker. That's probably close. The other thing I'm going to do, and I'm going to have to flip back and forth for you to really see this effect, but I'm going to change the layer type of this object from, and notice how I had to get out of the gradient, reselect the object, then I get the opacity with normal. I can change it down to multiply. Anytime I want to still show that color value below a shadow, I use multiply. So I'm going to try to multiply. It looks like nothing occurred, but let me show you from this side. I'm going to have to go in and show my head, Nice. So what that does is it takes, let's just hide it. It takes this color of this mouth, which is, you know, kind of similar to my flesh of maybe the inside of my mouth or whatnot, and it darkens it. So it gives it that really nice depth. I could always extend this a little bit if I decide, you know, I want it to be a little bit more. Be careful. I don't want my teeth to look like gray. That would be weird. All right, so let's do that to this guy. I can grab this. That's fine and all, but it's backwards. So one way I can change that is go back into my gradient and swap him 180 degrees. So now he's the opposite. So now see how much more volume I have in the teeth, which is really great. It gives my teeth a little volume. It gives my mouth some depth. Ooh. I just want to pull these out a little bit more. Nope, that gave way too much roundness to my... I want to make sure my front teeth are white. And that's pretty close. Gives some volume. It's not perfect, but it gives it some nice volume. I could mess with the opacity of either of these. Like if I wanted to try it at 100 and just see how that looks. And it's pretty close. Got to be real careful because like this lip then should be casting a shadow. So I don't want to get into too much. I just want a subtle look. Now let's flop this back. And let's also lock it. And then you can see it looks like my teeth still are going back way too far on both sides. So I'm going to bring them in, and that's going to help that mouth like form a little bit better. So let's open up the teeth, grab these two, and I'm just using my keyboard because that's what I typically use when I'm trying to move points. Okay, let's see if that looks a little bit better. Definitely closer. This one's still too far, so I'm gonna move him over. It's a give and take. So like I'm getting rid of this tooth, but I'm not adding another tooth over there because that one's like a real sharp darkness. And what I think I'll do is darken this just a little bit and then have this guy hang. He looks pretty good. He gives just a little bit of shadow. I could bring him over the tiniest amount. That looks good. And this one, what I may do is actually bring him back. And it's a little bit closer. Okay, I could do another. If I want, I could come in here and add in some detail. I will tell you, be very, very careful when you start adding in details like this because teeth are funny and they're more you almost want to think of them all as one object instead of a whole bunch of little objects. Like I would never do this dark line that I'm about to show you. But I'm going to give you a reference of what you could do. I'm going to go to my favorite profile. I'm going to make it tiny. Not bad. And I'm going to turn down its opacity, even though it is tiny. I mean, I just don't want this weird tooth. Okay, now let's look and see if these are kind of in the right area. And if I like that enough, which I'm not minding it, even though it's not normally my cup of tea to like draw out each of the teeth, I am going to copy and paste this line that I already really like. I'm tucking these behind my lips though, remember? So you're not necessarily going to see them. I'm going to stop there because I just want to see how that looks. I am not a fan. That is going away. Trial and error. Nothing's wrong with that. We're going to leave those nice and bright for now. Okay. There we go. Mouth. Good, and I've got a little bit of volume. Head. And it does look good. I'm not printing this very large. For me, this is going to go on a pretty small scale, so I'm not going to get in there with those details. Swap this back. Okay. Now, let's get into some more fun, fine details. Let's add in these little guys. My smile lines. I'm just going to leave, I'm going to get all my lines in at once, save myself some time, and then add my properties to everybody at the same time. That looks good. I know that I don't really see a big line on my chin, but I know that will help give a little definition to my chin. So I'm going to add in a little fine guy for that. Make sure he's kind of centering up. Then I'm going to add in some lines for the side of my nose to give the shape of my nose just a little bit of definition. I'm also going to consider doing just a little bit of that to give a little bit of shape. And again, I'm going to change all of these in a few minutes. I'm going to make these really thin and faint. I think that's for the most part the lines that I want. I'll go ahead and do like my collarbone, which again, it's hard to see in this photo, but it gives you a basic idea. I just know that they're kind of right here. Okay, so I've got all these nice lines. I'm going to grab all of them using shift click. I don't want these lines to be black like I have like my main details like my eyes and nose. I want them to be a darker skin tone, but not black. So I'm going to use my skin color. Again, I could always get to it. Remember, I saved that. And I'm going to choose a color, a shade of this, a darker shade. I'm going to come up, put in my favorite profile, and I'm going to make these really thin, 0.25 of a stroke. Okay, you can't see anything, which is fine. So let's go swap back our fills. Be careful. I'm going to do one at a time so I don't mess up anything. Oh, nice. And see, then you can see how some of these lines look. So for me, these are a little too dark. Easy to change. Grab them both at the same time so they look the same. And turn them back. This looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with the rest. Oh, I also want to get a little bit of an ear in there. So I'm just going to get this curvature of my ear. want them to be the same. You can't really get the profile won't transfer over, so you have to force a profile for each one, but that at least gave me the color and the 0.25. And then I can also swap my ear back. It's subtle, it's so subtle, but I'm not trying to make a huge impact with some of these lines. Okay, good. Very close. Now let's give it even more form. Lock some stuff. I'm gonna leave this as final detail lines. I'm gonna come up here and call these form because I'm gonna add some cheeks, some highlights, my nose. So first let's start with the cheek. So I know my cheeks are right in there, depending on the shape of your cheek. And you can do with it what you want. I'm going to add a gradient. Again, why isn't it working? It's because I have the stroke forward. Swap that. Go over to my gradient panel, and I want it to be a radial. I'm going to go in. Oops, I added an extra picker. I'm going to go in. I'm going to use just my regular red for now. Okay, so you're like, well, yeah, but you're not a clown, because that's kind of funny. And actually, I want this to hug just a little bit of my cheek, right? The shape of it's not going to exactly with this part of the gradient, but you can get it pretty close. Move that guy around so he actually sort of hugs it. And then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to turn the opacity down a whole bunch. So now I have this nice subtle cheek. We can try to swap it for the other side. I copied and pasted, Command C, Command V. Then I'm going to come up to Object, Transform, and Reflect. I want it to reflect across the vertical. I can see a preview if I want. Great. I can kind of use this guy. He's not going to work perfectly, but he gets me close. I want to look at how the shape of, there's where my problem is. It's too round. I don't want that. It's weird. So it reflected some of it, but it didn't reflect everything. So I'm going to rotate this, pull it, pinch it just a little bit. Okay, I'm going to keep repeating this for quite a few different things. You could add contour, you could add shadow. I'm going to add in some highlights. So I'm going to use this. I'm going to add a nice highlight right here on my forehead to give my head some definition. And that guy shaped all kinds of weird. Let's just go plain for now. Then I'll pop in my gradient. Now, I want this to be a highlight. So I'm going to obviously take out the blush, put in a highlight, double check how the shape of it is. So I pull it in. Then I don't want a spotlight on my forehead, so I'm going to turn down the opacity. But notice it does give my face a really nice definition. So I could keep going. I'm going to copy Command C and Command V. I'm going to use this on my nose, this highlight that I've already created. I'm just going to kind of go down the center of my face and utilize this same highlight to save time. Definition on my nose. Let's go back to the original. Definition for my chin. If it gets too bright, no big deal. Turn it down. The chin one to me just stands out a little too much. So now I'm starting to get some good definition. I can also add this into the top of my collarbone. Let's make it shape a little bit better. Paste another one, bring him into place. You want to be symmetrical with these things. They've gotten really too bulky. They're not going to pop out that much, so I'm going to turn down their opacity even more. Good, and I would probably put in a shadow in there. Let's even put another, I'm just copying and pasting this nice little highlight that I've already created. I'm going to pop him up into my eyebrow. I'm going to pinch him in a little bit. Great. Copy paste, move him over here. Manipulate him some so that he fits in better. But now just see how quickly you can get some form in this, your figure. Okay, I'm going to show you also how we can make this eye sit in a little bit darker. We're going to do the same thing as we did for the mouth. So we're going to come in here and make this shape. We're going to swap it to a linear, and we're going to change the colors back to black for shadow. And you can either swap it this way, or you can just move those. Nice. That gives a lot more definition to the eye. I'm going to copy and paste him and reflect, although I'm still going to have to change some stuff. Good. Let's attempt if we can get him to work in here. Good. I would need to fix that one little spot that's showing. Definition in my eyes. Let's even put in some, excuse me. Let's double check our layers. I can relock that. Okay, I'm still only in form, which is great. Look how much more form we have just from these few moments. I'm going to show you how to do some more shadow. And I don't even mean eyeshadow. I just mean that your eye has a natural shadow, whether you're wearing makeup on it or not. That doesn't really matter. But your eyebrow would cast a shadow. So I'm kind of doing that and double duty because it's making it look like I have makeup. Now, obviously, it's in front of your eye. It's also way too dark. So I'm going to cut this, Command X. I'm going to go under my lashes, but on top of my color. Oh no, I want to go below. Make a new layer, eye shading, and I'm going to Command Shift V in place. Now I'm going to turn it to multiply. I'm going to turn this down a whole bunch. But look how much nice volume that can give to your eye. I'm going to try to utilize this guy to do a second one on the other side by copy paste with the Command C, Command V, and then reflecting. He's not going to work exactly, but he'll get me close. Work harder, not smarter. Or work smarter, not harder. Let's get that right. That one looks odd. more volume. Now be careful, it is a spiral. Once you start adding gradients, you need to consider adding gradients to everything. So just sort of check yourself a little bit. I definitely want to add, well, I want to turn this back. It's just still so bright. I want to add a shadow below my chin. So here, chin shadow. Sort of hugging the shape of my chin, but elongated. Manipulating the gradient to be super subtle for me, and that's still way too dark. So what am I gonna do? I'm gonna change the opacity. I'm also gonna turn it from normal to multiply. Double check that those did as well. Yep. Still a little dark, like right there. That just looks strange to me. So we're gonna just hand do it much better. I don't want it to look like it's a double chin. Good. You can add in really subtle shapes, kind of like we did with this as a cheek. I would probably let's just get them in there first. I would probably not go black. I would go more like the brown colors that we've been using. It's just warmer looking. And that gives a little definition of a cheek. I can manipulate this as well to I kind of want to see what he looks like. If it was a linear. Very faint. So we'll check we haven't turned to multiply. So important. I'm going to make him even more faint. I just kind of barely want him in there. I mean, I know it's only 8%, but that's a nice subtle little change. What else? We need to obviously replicate him. We're gonna have some issues because he's gonna fall off the edge. So we'll just pull him in. Not a big deal. I just don't want him outside of my face. Remember, you're working in single pixels, so that's pretty close. I would like a little bit of a highlight. On my cheeks. I want this to be back up in that other layer, so I'm going to Command X. I'm going to make sure, oh, no, I am in the correct layer. Paste them back, Command Shift B. I'm going to copy, paste, and flip. This other side, I'm not going to stress too much. I'm running off the page, except for the fact that you want to be real careful with if you're going to have a background. So I will pull this in just so you guys are practicing that. Those need to be so much more subtle. Just not in love with the way that's looking. I'm going to swap him back. I'm a little just happier with him rounded, so we're going to leave him like that. Pull this guy because I want him to overlap, saturate all those colors. Before it's real bright. Push, pull, push, pull. The only last thing is I wish that my hair had just a little bit of gradient in it. So there's a few different ways we could do that. Locking all these layers and saving. But the biggest would be going into your hair layer. It's going to get scary before it gets better because we're going to go in and add a radial. And I just got bold for a second. We're going to make both of these this and also be 100%. That's not what we're trying to do. Now, let's see how this guy is. Okay. So what I want is a little bit of this one to be just a hair breadth lighter. There we go. I'm going to use the highlight color. And now I've got some nice volume. It also ties back in with the ponytail. And I think this looks pretty good. You can keep going, but this gives you at least a really good start. You can put 100 more hours into a portrait to get it the way you want it. Hope this helps. Keep going. Create some artwork that you love. Don't give up when you get frustrated. Take a deep breath. Hit save. Come back. Your goal is to have a great portfolio piece and a great piece for your branding. So you'll be happy with it when you're done. And artwork is a lot of trial and error and mistakes. So don't give up when those happen. Good luck.